software development has become so complex these days, with so many teams involved to launch a significant product, that you have to establish the conditions in the environment in order for Agile or for Scrum to work. So the team can do everything that the manifesto says or Scrum says, but if the conditions are not right and you have a lot of old technology that you have to work with in terms of systems you have to support and integrate with, and the organization isn't structured the right way, then a lot of the ideas in the manifesto are pretty much
may not materialize.
Yeah, they're guaranteed to fail. Welcome to Agile Clips, where we break down Agile into manageable pieces. In this episode, Santosh gives us a debriefing on the Agile Alliance conference he attended in Orlando in 2023. Hi, Santosh. How are you?
Very good. Steve, how are you?
Very good, thank you. As we discussed before sitting down to record this, I know that in July you went to a Agile conference in Orlando, and thought that we could talk about that. Does that sound good?
It was Agile Alliance. I went to Agile Alliance 2022, and this was 2023. 2022 was in Nashville, and this time in July, it was in Orlando.
Nice and warm.
Hot.
But
hot
actually, that's a great segue, because I wanted to ask you, I've heard that attendance at some of these conferences has diminished. Was that your experience as well?
Very much so. Very much. You could feel the difference. Even the very first day. I mean, I went there Sunday evening and pre-registration. Usually, because that way I was generally what I do is I go there. So the usual friends and acquaintances, I'll get to see them ahead of time, and we decide what to do and all that. And even there are very few people at the pre-registration. So I thought maybe tomorrow will be crazy and all that. So I went in early. No, it was like people just walking through, getting registered. Even the first keynote, I'm like, what happened? Even the hall was smaller. So usually you're used to see 5,000 people and standing room only for the opening keynote and all. Nope.
Do you have any theories why that might be the case?
Well, I think my thinking was that there are too many conferences, and it is getting fragmented, because people were, even this one, they had one, I think in Amsterdam, they were televising that. So it was like together. So people didn't, and I think that was the other part, was travel was another challenge. So people were not, people from all over the world were not there. They were there, but not as much as they usually are.
Right.
So it was interesting. But I asked some of those, like, why this? And they said, well, we distributed. Some are going to SAFE. I think there was around the same time, there was one in Colorado, or maybe a week here and there. So people also distributed themselves. And there was markedly less. But that what happened was then the vendors and presenters were also very unique or different. So we generally have certain type of people very well known, and they showing up there. They were only 30% of them were like Melissa Perry. She was there. Bob Gallen, he was there.
Who were the keynote speakers?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's been a while but I think the one that I remembered on the first day, on Monday, Anne-Marie Charette, she had Agile Up Your Leadership Game. And I thought that was very powerful. So the kind of things see, my attitude about all this is that even if I get 2 or 3 new ideas on one day, I feel, yes, I got the money's worth, because and that was one of the ones that really, she had some really good thoughts about agility. I think it's been 20 years now from the Scrum.org just published a new Scrum Guide last year, revision, the first revision after 20 years. So it's no longer just something that is up and coming. It's established now. So it's now the agility is playing in a different role, a different arena. So the leadership does make a difference. And some of the things she mentioned in her opening things were like, wow, I was not thinking on those lines, kind of. So it was.
Can you be a little bit more specific? I'm really curious.
So I was just going to pull some of the thoughts that I had pulled together, or at least the ones that made me think twice. And I was like, this is interesting. We need to talk about this. So let me pull this up, because she did not share her deck, but I was writing things very feverishly. And one of the things that is coming back to is, what is the human-centric design? Because we started with software, and now it is coming around the whole thing that is, it's all about humans. It is all about how we build agility around the human, and the scope of that, as to every member of the team needs to think about what is the human aspect of even the technology. The support engineers, they need to understand what impact on the human side of things that is going to happen. So it's a very interesting thought process. Like they also say, there is a fatigue around all this. It's like people are saying, we are fatigued by disruption, constantly creating. Can we get to the end, please? So that was some of the thought process that came through. I'm like, yeah, it does feel that way, that we are trying to rush constantly and keep on changing, and then are we getting to the end state? But one of the things that she mentioned was really impactful. She's like, growth happens when you are doing things that are not known. The known things will not let you grow. The things that are not known or unknown things will let you grow. So as soon as you see something that is unknown, you have to back yourself and say that I want to get that. I want to, and that's where the confidence is getting built. So I thought that was a very, thought-provoking thing, is to every time. I remember, a few episodes back or something that we had talked about, as to when the product design is going on, people always think, we need to have this new idea. So one of the, VPs or a product leader just said, hey, we are always trying to build a expressway or a synchronized lights and all that. But what we need is actually a helicopter taking you point A to point B. Because if you build the highway, the problems still are the same. You're on the ground. You need this helicopter idea. And that is what is going to change and disrupt or change that. So what is your helicopter? Something similar to that. What is unknown there? And how will you build that? And how will you take that? So then so I thought that was very, very interesting from that point of view. And then the one of the other things she was also mentioning is that she completely changed the perspective of manifesto, and how does that manifesto changes meaning to the human centric. So for example, individuals versus interaction and interactions, like that means we have to create the space for the people. That's what that individual interaction starts. So constantly nurture and advocate and coach people. So that is what that first part is. The second part that she was talking about, the working software, was software is just the media. Now if you look at the broader side of things, it's coach people to be leaders. So that's the kind of the next level. The software is a product, and how people can become part of the leads and leaders, and focus on the leadership skill instead of being a leader. And then focus on the confidence and ability. So that is like the working software, working entity. That she changed that to that. I was like, never thought of it in that way. The customer collaboration. So it's like, how do you take a look at, if the collaboration is there, that means we are handling the change. So how do you manage the change is where the collaboration is needed. So it's a kind of a different take on the same manifesto. And then she was also talking about the responding to change. Well, if we are responding to change, the fourth one, that means you need an authentic leadership. So it's all about human interaction. How will you become an authentic leader? And unless we are authentic to ourselves, you cannot become a true leader. And then otherwise you cannot respond to the change, because the authenticity has to come through.
Yeah, so that's a very, very different perspective on the manifesto.
Yeah, really. And I know it changed the mindset in my mind. Was like, now because we are going away from the software centric to a larger organization centric, and the scale larger every aspect of any organization, then it really comes out to how the leadership work, how does the relationships work, how does the human factor comes in, and where does that whole thing fits in. So I was totally, the very first day I'm like, I'm done. I don't need to attend anymore. So, but yeah, it was great that she had that first opening keynote. So she set the stage, really.
I heard recently, though, that the truth of the matter is that the people who wrote the manifesto were all extremely skilled software professionals, and they were really focused on addressing issues that, when you look at the manifesto, you can sort of understand why, that it's sort of one team, it's a very constrained environment, but software development has become so complex these days, with so many teams involved to launch a significant product, that you have to establish the conditions in the environment in order for Agile or for Scrum to work. So the team can do everything that the manifesto says or Scrum says, but if the conditions are not right, and you have a lot of old technology that you have to work with in terms of systems you have to support and integrate with, and the organization isn't structured the right way, then a lot of the ideas in the manifesto are pretty much
may not materialize.
Yeah, they're guaranteed to fail. So,
well, the other part is when it happens, it becomes, people go through the motions.
Yes, exactly.
And not the intent behind it. So I think that's what the other part she was saying, that you're looking at those words and taking it literally, and then you just put your blinders on. So then all those, I don't need documentation. That means, no, we need a documentation. We don't need any plan. No, unless you have a plan, things are not going. So it's a different take on all this. And then I think once you start expanding as to how these complexities are going to be handled, then it really comes out.
Exactly. That's where the human element and leadership really come into play to foster the right environment.
There was somebody, I don't know who has that, at what stage they had mentioned this, because there was a track for diversity, and which was like, okay, agile diversity. I was never thinking about that as an issue, but somebody brought that up, saying that the Agile Manifesto contributors are only men. There were no women. Forget about the other side. But so there was some debate about that as to how come no women were even invited, or no women went there. I'm like, has that changed the direction of manifesto, that it was men-centric? But so that was pretty interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So I thought, maybe we should look at that. And but because what we are seeing in I guess most of our organizations, there are the mix, men and women are almost 50-50, or sometimes even more women are there than men. So,
right.
I guess that, how do you actually implement that and use that, I think has been adopted over the years into taking both the approaches from how the product gets decomposed and built based on the who is part of the team, I guess. But yeah, I didn't think in those terms that agile principles and manifesto would be geared towards a men's mentality. Well, we have to take a look at that. But that was pretty interesting. The other one that was really, really interesting were two of them actually. One was the storytelling through the product lens from Stuart Young. He's a phenomenal guy. It's about how do we start telling the story and how does agility bring the story together. We have the story mapping. I mean, he incorporated all that together, but that aspect of what type of storytellings are there, depending upon type of personal or personas are there, the different story kind of things start showing up. And I was like, I never thought of it. And then I started looking at it from what type of product you are building. And that can decide, it's like there is a strategic part to a story, there is a visionary part to a story, there's an implementer part to a story, and a tactical part to a story. And then you can start building that things out depending upon who you are. Some people are visual storytelling, create these animated or pictorial kind of
right
things. And some they're like creative storyboarding. Then depending upon who the audience is and who is the participant, and there are creative side of it. So it was interesting because now if we are asking people to start moving things like a combined development and stuff like that, so that not just the UX designer, but then the developers and the product owner, everybody sits together to come up with this story. Then you have to think about, how come the creative guys will think differently than the implementer?
this is actually very appropriate. It's one of the things I've been wrestling with recently. And I was trying to introduce story mapping in my organization. Mm-hmm. And I did a sort of workshop with one team. Mm-hmm. And it was super effective. And we had engineers there as well as product and UX people. But there's been a lot of pushback that it's not the best use of engineers' time to be in those sessions, which I really disagree with. But that was the outcome. So we will keep doing story mapping, but it's going to be more at the early phases of a project between product management, user experience, user research, and any stakeholders we can get hold of. And then,
funny you should mention that. It's because we are doing something very similar, but in a compressed manner, so that this whole storytelling and storyboarding with everyone together. But what we have trying to do is what we call it as a continuous discovery. So the scale and the scope is much more limited. And every 2 sprints, we actually get a direct feedback from the end user. And then we start building on the top. So now the developers or the product, they now know why they are there, because they are actually going to start building the build 1, build 2, build 3.
Very nice.
Then that creates a foundation for and then it's almost like that's where they come to thinking of what is the minimum marketable feature will look like, and how that expands to 1, 2, 3, and rinse and repeat beyond that. And now they're actually seeing it. It's like, this is the reason why I need to be in the early part of this, combined development or combined design concept. So it is they now realize this is what it means by failing early, failing or continuous feedback loops and all those kind of things. So once they put their hands on, they were like, we have never seen this kind of thing done within a month. 2 prototypes actually went out.
I mean, you cannot beat it as far as shared understanding is concerned. It's the best way. And
absolutely.
The other thing is when there's a UI involved, getting wireframes done immediately after story mapping, that really helps convey the whole idea to the developers of what they need to build.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other part also he was mentioning as to what does the product ownership model looks like in this whole story mapping or story building, is because there are different components of it. There is a product management, project management, there is a leadership and business analysts and those kind of compartmental, but then shared understanding, all those 4 comes together because every part has to have all those 4 and they contribute to that. And that's how the whole thing is. Instead of linear going through, it becomes concentric. or the same environment. So it changes the perspective as to, oh, we never thought of it, how the sausage was made. So there were people who were, at least I was like, wow, this is really. So I have one of that also. That was pretty interesting, and I think that was happening on the first day. I was like,
wow,
this is intense. I never thought that on the first day, because I was going to go to Disney parks in the evening. I'm like, no, I'm too exhausted. I don't want to go anywhere.
So I'm curious what other takeaways you had, and in particular, what you think you can apply sooner rather than later.
Well, this for sure. I mean, this is definitely was one thing that came to mind. But one of the other things, our dear friend Tom Perry, he had a really interesting concept of something called as a Agile thermodynamics of a system.
Oh, my favorite subject at university.
Yes.
Not.
But he had a very good twist to it, and some of the things that he brought to present there. I mean, I have to go and dig his thing out, but man, he did an amazing job of just to give you an idea. One of the things that he looked at, the thermodynamics is basically how physical systems work and how sequentially things happen even in thermodynamic world, from the engineering aspect of it. But there was one experiment that he showed that apparently has been conducted over thousands of times. Just a simple thing about, if you have a dog, have a dog and you're throwing a ball to a dog, but the only difference is you are on a beach and you throw the ball into the ocean. The dog will not directly go into water and start chasing the ball. He will first run parallel to the waves on the in the sand, and then at a diagonal, he will go and get the ball. And what they found out is, intuitively, the time that is spent on the ground running parallel and the time that is spent in the water chasing the ball is exactly the same. And they did it in so many different ways, and that the dogs figure it out.
That's interesting.
And I was like, really? The whole thing. So what he was saying about all this is the larger aspect where you're running fast and getting things done. That time, that could be your project or your product that you spend, and see how much time you're spending on that part, and then how much you're spending on the tactical part where you go in the water to get there, to get the things done. And if that is balanced, you'll get the most optimal results. I was like, wow, this is phenomenal.
So, sorry, what's the equivalent of running on the sand, and what's
running on the sand is where you have larger, like for example, you have a huge product, like a complex product. You have to break it down at a much more faster layer first, break it down to the smaller components there. So the amount of time you spend breaking it down and then actual developing that smaller component where you can actually deliver that, you have to think as to how much time are you spending on each of these phases. If you're spending too much time on either of those, the balance is off. So whenever you are designing a product, or suppose you are designing a car, if you start creating all these different things and then just build something and put it on the street, that's where the problem. So you have to balance those concept versus tactical on the same level. You will get a better versions every time you go through. The second time you go through, you do the same thing. And I thought,
interesting.
So I thought that was pretty, thought-provoking.
It reminded me of one thing, which it's not exactly what you were saying, but there was a project I worked on with another consultant once, and we were actually building an application. And as soon as I had an idea of what the requirements were, I started writing code.
Mm-hmm.
And this other guy was just talking and talking and talking and talking. And it was getting close to the deadline, and he hadn't even started writing any code. But he did actually finish on time.
Mm.
And I could argue that maybe his approach was more like waterfall, that was in a way doing a lot of planning, or at least trying to understand the requirements before implementing, and what I was doing was more iterative because I started early and then I could show a prototype. But his work was also pretty, I mean, it was on time and he achieved what he had to achieve and he solved the right problem and all of that. But it was just two different styles of getting there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I mean, we're going, but there was another one session which was very interesting. I actually ran an experiment with my teams where I am right now. One of the things what they did was, I forget the topic that they had selected. This was like, one whole room, and randomly the organizers split the room into 3 groups, and they gave 20 minutes total, 20 or maybe 30 minutes. The topic was given as to, hey, for example, small agile teams versus large agile. And one group had to say, what is the advantage of having the small agile? The other group had to say, no, the large agile teams are better. Or what are the advantages of that? And then they were supposed to present their part and the other team would question. And then the second one. And then there was the third group, which was just observing and seeing whether, they are convinced one way or the other. Or pretty powerful. People were randomly put in there. So, even though they did not support that idea, they had to come up with the person. And, some of the concepts that were put forth, I never even thought of it, that the smaller teams would think about it in that way. Or the largest team would be, say, oh, no larger team. So the things that really need that. And, so what I did was, I did the same thing at my work because we have weekly agile coaches hour, and we invite everyone, including the team members and all. And I divided them into 2 groups and said small stories, user stories versus larger user stories. And they had to, put advantages in there. And people who were like, they said, this is one of the best hour that we learned as to what are this. So I thought that was really a good way of thinking outside the box. And even if the ones that you don't like, that's subject to enhance.
I absolutely love this. And I can imagine applying this even when there's some kind of a debate over the technical architecture or anything. Exactly. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So I thought that went really well. That was...
I'll be trying that.
Yeah.
Quite soon.
Yeah, and everyone, including our senior managers, management team, and everyone was jumping into that whole thing. So it was very interesting. The different aspects came into picture, and I thought,
that's genius.
Yeah. So that was one really amazing things. There were other ones, but I think those were like a 4 really that stood out. I thought maybe I should mention that. We could do it next time also, but I think we covered a lot of time in here. But
that's awesome. So you're planning to go to any future conferences?
Well, that is my goal, that at least one conference a year I have to go, because, not in these sessions. I think I learned a lot more with people I was sitting. One of the things I'll just say, there was one lady that was sitting with me, and she was ex-Marine, and she had been to Afghanistan and all that. Anyway, she was at 4 tour as a Marine. And when she was getting into the agility and all that kind of thing. So she's like, you know what? This is what we used to do when we were in Marines. I'm like, huh? I thought the Marines is completely command and control. It's like when they ask you jump, you just ask how high. That's about it. You don't have any other choice. Like, no. You don't realize that. They say, yes, you jump, and then they let you loose, and you decide where to jump. And they will. You are really empowered to do that. This is what we used to. This is what I'm like, I want to invite her to our podcast.
Well, that would be great. But I've heard the same thing, that it's more about explaining the intent, the what and the why, but not the how, because the people who are doing the planning don't really have all the local information about the conditions and all the unexpected things that happen.
Yeah, is that the turn the ship around?
Yeah,
that was exactly the behind.
Yes, David Marquette.
Yeah. So she's like, this is what we used to do. So I said, tell me more. so what I'm saying is, those are the kinds of things you learn outside of the lectures and things like that. So yeah, I definitely want to go. You make more friends, and see something different aspect of how they use it or how they don't use it, that kind of thing. So
great.
yeah.
Well,
How about
thank
you?
you for
Are you
sharing.
thinking of going anywhere for the?
I haven't planned going to conferences. I still love to attend meetups when I can. And I'm a really avid reader of books about Agile and psychology and so on, but
Yeah.
not conferences so much. I mean,
Oh,
I've, in the past when I've been, I have enjoyed them very much, but
yeah.
sort of for various reasons, it hasn't been practical for the last few years to go. So I have
Yeah.
not.
Well, if you come across any interesting books, maybe next time we can touch base on anything interesting that you might have.
Yeah, definitely.
So
Happy to
that could
do
be
that.
one of the next. And in the meantime, I'll try to solicit some of these completely different point of views and see what they have.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Santosh.
All right. Well,
Thanks.
as always, this has been always fun, and let's do this once a month so that we'll get it, because a lot of people have said, "Hey, welcome back. Now keep it up." So we
We'll
should do
try our
this.
best. All right. Thanks,
Exactly.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.